All right, here we go. Live Wednesday night, midweek stream. How's it going, everybody? Excited to be here and excited to talk to you guys tonight. Tonight, it should be a good one. A little bit to cover. I think it's going to be a rod and reel and tackle intensive show. So for you gearheads, this should be a good one. So I'd love to hear in the chat how our video and sound is tonight. Let us know to make sure we're not missing anything. But tonight, introduce Graham from ALFC, American Legacy Fishing Company. What's up, Graham?
Hold on, man. I'm getting some really bad feedback here.
That's weird. I'm not hearing anything on my end.
Let me see. I wonder if I accidentally...
You have YouTube open, maybe? Maybe you have YouTube open. Mute your YouTube, I guess.
Alrighty, great start. What's up, man? Thanks for having me.
Doug says we're good. Levi says we're good. So I think we're good. So I was just on your end. So yeah, how's it going?
Pretty good, man. Thanks for having me.
So it looks like you're in the shop. So that's the headquarters there.
Yeah, man. We just reopened our showroom. I think it was last Monday. So we're pretty stoked. We've got it all stocked up and waiting for some new stuff to come in for sure.
Right. So for those that don't know, what is ALFC?
Yeah, so we started in 2007, founded by Tom Ashby, and he really just had like one goal, and that was to stock every Loomis rod. He kind of got tired of, not having a one-stop shop where he could find Loomis rods, and he thought there was an opportunity to, provide that as a service. And he also saw a gap, I think, in the fishing industry in terms of customer service. I think he saw some of the other, suppliers and thought that was definitely a need. But yeah, we're in southern Indiana, and basically as far southwest in Indiana as you can get in Evansville on the Ohio River.
Nice. So you guys online as well as you have a showroom or a place where people can walk in and shop as well?
Yeah, both. It was one and the same kind of when it started, but it's definitely heavy on the online stuff. The walk-ins definitely account for a healthy percentage, but it's mainly online.
Right on. So is there anything you guys so the website is American Legacy Fishing?
Yep, AmericanLegacyFishing.com.
Nice. And so beyond, you guys started as kind of like a Shimano G Loomis power dealer, but now you've guys grown into a bit more, right?
Yeah, for sure, man. There was a time early on. I don't know if it was in the same year that we opened, but it was probably around there, 2008, 2009. And Loomis had an issue with their blanks. I don't know if they had trouble supplying some of the components, or they were having like defects or something. I can't remember, but basically they had a bunch of customers calling in and being like, "Hey, I need this rod," and they're like, "Well, we can't build that rod right now." So they just gave everybody our number and sent everybody our way, and that kind of just was the catalyst. But we've carried them all from the start. It was just kind of an event that sprung us forward into, carrying pretty much any brand you can think of now.
Very cool. Yeah. So for those that are tuning in, just let you know the agenda tonight. We're going to kind of discuss a bit of a sale promo going on. So stay tuned for that. If you haven't stocked up on all your rods and stuff for spring, we'll be covering that here pretty quick. We're going to do deep dive on some Dobyns rod stuff, model numbers, data, what sells, what doesn't sell, talk about some rod and reel combos. So I think there'll be a lot of cool data, and whether you're like into Dobyns or not, I think you're going to find some of this data useful and helpful and interesting, because, obviously you could apply, things you learn about 7-foot medium action rods to your favorite brand and things like that as well. So don't turn out just because you're not a huge Dobyns fan. I think there'll be still plenty of stuff that you'll find cool and interesting tonight. We're going to talk about like high-end rods versus budget rods and where and when to use them, and some cool programs that ALFC has. And, just in the end, we'll probably cover a bunch of rod and reel, rapid fire questions and things like that. So there's a lot to cover. I think it'll be interesting. Just wanted to give you guys kind of an idea of what was coming up. And I want to just shout out Arsenal Fishing. Thanks for supporting the show. You guys can go to arsenalfishing.com. code HellaBass15 will get you deals on, the wacky Nico pliers, some of their tackle, some of their apparel, things like that. So if you guys want to support the show in a low-key way and get some gear for yourself, then that's a good way to do it. So I just want to make sure we got that in, because there's definitely support these streams. Yeah. So you guys have, I think, really become very popular in the Dobyns community as well. Like, I guess, and originally, and I know you guys carry tons of other stuff, but you're very active in like the Dobyns community on Facebook and other places. Is anything, I don't know, is that just something you guys found? Like, how did you get started with Dobyns, and how did that relationship grow? And like, how's it been working with the community?
Yeah. So I'll kind of start with when we picked up Dobyns, and I think I was specifically told not to tell this story as I'm going to tell it, but we had a decent demand for it, and this is well before I started working here. This is back in like 2008. We had a decent amount of demand for it, and our ordering manager Brian, he was bugging Tom. He was like, hey, we've got a bunch of people asking about these rods. We should pick them up. Tom was like, no. And they went back and forth with that. He's like, yeah, we really need to get these rods. He's like, no. Finally, I think Tom broke, and we picked him up, and then we didn't sell a single Dobyns in a month of having them in the shop. But now, obviously, like you said, we've got a great relationship with them. They're up there, with Loomis and St. Croix as our number one selling brand, and the community is like no other. The activity, it's unreal. I don't know what it was at the beginning of last year, but it was probably under 2,000 last I looked. It was over 10, I believe, over 10,000. And I don't think that anybody told us, or maybe somebody did tell us. I think that the actual way we found it was not great news. I think there had been a rod that had been delivered broken, and
sure,
they were questioning the integrity of the rod tubes that we sent our rods in, and went in there and kind of squashed that out and just stuck around. And yeah, everybody on there is pretty cool and pretty responsive. It seems to be a pretty healthy community, and that someone will ask a question, it's like instantly. Like, if I'll post something, it's like it makes me question what some of the guys are doing during the day,
Well,
but
you don't need to talk about me right in front of my face like that, Graham.
there are a few other names I could drop, but
nice. Well, Will Perryman says he's a big fan. He's been dealing with you guys for like 6 years, so that's awesome.
Right on. Thanks, Will.
So speaking of Dobyns, so this week you guys are running a bit of a sale on Dobyns. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, for sure, man. We kind of labeled it as a gimmicky stimulus sale. Everybody's got some money coming in, and I think that was a pretty good catalyst for the entire last year of sales, especially with Dobyns, as I know you covered with Gary whenever you guys talked. But yeah, it's no code. You just jump on there. We've got them all marked down 15% off, but there is a code you can use. If you haven't seen it yet, you can use HELLA5 to get an additional 5%. So you bring that rod to 20% off, and then it'll take the rest of your cart down 5% as well. So
yeah. So if you haven't seen their website before, American Legacy Outdoors Fishing.com. Here's the Dobyns, right? You can see the prices, like he mentioned, are all adjusted 15% down already. And then you can use code HELLA5 to bump it up to 20%, basically. But then I think you also get, if there's a Dobyns in your cart, right? You get the extra 5% off on your Dobyns, but you also get 5% off on the other stuff you purchase with it. Is that correct?
Yep.
So if you're going to get some worms, a reel, some line, you can save a little extra on all that. And you guys carry a pretty healthy, and we'll get into a lot of this, but I mean, you guys, I don't know if it's every model and everything's in stock, probably a little bit after the sale's been going for a few days, but there's a lot of stuff to choose from. Yeah,
we've got every model, and we even have some new ones that aren't listed. If you're after the Sobe series or any of the new split handle Xtasys, we've got a handful of both of those. So the best way to order would be to just call in, or you can message me on Facebook anytime during the day. I'm pretty quick to respond.
Ryan says he's already nabbed the 610 Kaden. You going to use that as a jerkbait rod, or what is your plan for the 610 Kaden, Ryan? But yeah, so that's that's the promo. It started last Friday and it goes through this Friday at a certain time, or when does that
Yep,
end?
it'll end Friday at midnight. So basically,
Friday
it
at
turns
midnight.
over into.
So you got about 48 hours to jump in on this. Awesome. So we're gonna break down some of this and come back to this and cover this in more detail. And I guess I don't know. There was a really cool picture the other day of you guys had a whole forklift piled up with rod tubes going out the door of packed up rods.
Yeah, every once in a while I'm walking through the shop with just like, oh, I think somebody might want to see that. And that one was just a pile of rods that we normally use a cart and we had to throw them on a pallet. We had so many and use a fork truck to move them.
Yeah, awesome. It very might well, David. Will wants to know, do you guys know when you'll have some Vanfords in, the new spinning reels from Shimano?
Oh, man. I'm trying to think. We just got some Stratics, and we've got 500s and 5000s in Vanfords, which aren't super appealing for bass anglers. But last I heard, I think it was sometime in late May. That's kind of the date that everybody's given me, which honestly is pretty good. Just a few months out is better than what it has been of 6+ months out for some.
Sure. Okay. Bill says need a Kaden 740 or 745 for jigs. Yeah, those Kaden rods have been very popular. Me personally, I haven't held them, but based on what I like in the other Dobyns rods, I would definitely go 745 for jigs. That's more my preference, but they're both would be good rods.
I would agree. I was comparing that 744 just a second ago to the 744 Champion, which is their jig special, and
sure.
The 744 and the Kaden is just a regular fast, whereas that jig special is an extra fast. And you can definitely feel that difference. That Kaden definitely bends a little bit further into the rod.
Nice. So it kind of depends on, if you're 1/4 and 3/8 and lighter jigs and, 12-pound type line, probably the 744. But if you're more of a 3/8, 1/2 ounce, 3/4, and you like 17 to 20-pound fluoro, then I'd probably go like a 745. So speak of that, we just talked about some model numbers. And let's break down. And I think because some people, you come from Shimano or you come from Loomis or maybe another brand rod and you get used to their model numbers, and the Dobyns models may or may not make sense to you. And so the first two numbers, so if we're talking 745, that means 74 inches, which is 7'2", right? And so that, if it's a 683, that's a 68-inch rod, which just means it's 6 foot. No, wait, I'm doing that wrong.
You're thinking Loomis.
Loomis version.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, so 745 is 7'4", not inches. So that's what Loomis. So so there you go. If you came from Loomis like I did years ago, right? 844 is 84 inches, right? Whereas a 745 is 7'4", and then the last number is the power of the rod. So it's feet, inches, power for Dobyns. Now that I've confused us all, but
you're good. Dobyns actually is the easiest model number of any. We like them for that. They kind of help that. So just like you said, first two numbers length, last number power.
Yeah. So there you go. It's easier. It's feet. Yeah, you don't have to do math in your head. So that's what you need to remember about Dobyns. You don't have to convert inches to feet and that kind of stuff. Bill says he's all set on the 745. Brian said he just picked up the Fury swimbait rod, which is super popular, and we'll talk about that more. That's a very good selling rod. Yeah, we're definitely going to get into the data, Chris. So we just want to make sure everybody understands what it means. So they typically end in a C for a casting rod. They'll typically end in an SF, Sam Frank for a spinning model. And then sometimes they'll end in like CB, which will designate crankbait, or SB for swimbait, or sometimes they'll end in like flip/punch or things like that. But that's the basic nomenclature. But the good thing about most Dobyns rods is they come with a ton of information. You won't be able to see this, but it's a bit of an eye chart. But like they come with a whole bunch of information about most rods have like their action and like the lure weight and the line ratings, right? But they typically are labeled with all the recommended lures, right? Jerkbait, crankbait, spinnerbait, that kind of stuff on the rods as well. So that is helpful as well. And they're, and most of the websites that carry them also echo that, which makes it very easy to do that. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I will add to that. Like, we have a lot of people who look at those recommendations, and I think that kind of locks them into only using that rod for that. And definitely never the case with any of their rods.
Consider that a starting point.
Yeah,
for sure.
For
That's
sure.
not limited to. That's a good point. Recommendation for a dual casting rod. I would say the most popular thing I hear for a dual casting rod is a 734C. And you can get that in several of the models. You can get, I think, that in the Fury, the Sierra, and the Champ line, if I'm not mistaken. And they're all very popular selling rods. So that 7'3" power is a really popular, and I would say, or a 703 or a 733. And we can break down some of that in more detail, but that's really a sweet spot.
734 is a good one. Down here, if you're looking for like a do-it-all moving bait rod that you could also do some bottom contact stuff with up shallow, the 703 in any of those as well is super versatile. It's got a good action for just about anything.
Yeah, it kind of depends on what do-all do you mean. Like do-all, like jigs, spinner baits, half-ounce lipless,
right?
Chatterbait, 734. Do-all, crankbaits, lighter swim jigs, throw a Senko and a finesse jig, then like a 703, 733.
Yep.
That's what I need, a good swim bait glide rod. Yeah, if you're on a budget and especially if you're not like, I kind of want to get into swim baits, but I don't know if I'm like all in, get the 795 Fury. If you really know you want to get into the swim baits hard, then you could look at the Champ. But my Copper the Coonhound's chiming in just in time. What's up, Sean? He says, this is probably why you guys are doing well, because Sean is just straight up addict.
Yeah, for sure.
And, you probably recognize his name. You probably see by somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we've spoke, probably email or phone. Definitely see it come across the orders pretty frequently.
All right, sounds like my daughter's already working on getting the dogs in the kennel, so hopefully crisis averted there. All right, so what I did is Graham was nice enough to help share some data of their 2020 sales for Dobyns rods. And I thought it'd be really interesting to share with you guys some of the things that were super popular, what rods were good sellers, which series sold the most, and give you some analytics on what people are buying, what people are doing, and things like that. And I think whether you're interested in Dobyns rods or not, I think this data will be pretty eye-opening for some of you to understand what some of the popular rods are and help you make buying decisions, whether it's during the sale or in the future, whenever that is, that I think you'll find interesting. And hopefully you do. So I pulled together some data, and they shared some of this. And they actually sell quite a few Dobyns rods. So this isn't like a set of like 20 rods, sample size. This is a pretty significant sample size of rods. So I think it's a pretty interesting look.
Yeah, it was sick to see him whenever you sent over those numbers earlier. It was cool to see him just on the spreadsheet, but when you condensed them down, like we're about to look at, it was pretty cool to look at.
And so I use some of my daytime pivot, like really simple. I'm not bragging here. These are very simple pivot charts. So like, it's not like these are like amazing. Like I'm not flexing with pivots by any means on this, but just quickly was able to put together some data on this. So hopefully you guys find this interesting and helpful. And if you guys want to share this out, you got buddies that are looking at rods or reels or looking for a deal, invite them to the stream, get them to join. Looks like we're closing in. We're getting 75 plus people in the stream, so that's awesome. So so this is the 2020 Dobyns sales data. One thing you'll know is you won't see any Kadens in here because Kadens, you guys basically just got those in a month or two ago.
Yeah, I think we got them in right after our November sale. So any numbers from 2020 would have been pretty much
probably late. Yeah. So so the one thing that jumped out at me really quick, doing a quick split, is that like in Dobyns, and I'm sure this is probably, and you can speak to if there's any anomalies based on what you would know, but like 80% casting to spinning rods, only 20%. So like a 4-to-1 ratio. Is that pretty common in general?
Yeah,
for you guys?
I'd say with St. Croix or Loomis, where they offer so many spinning models in inshore and panfish type rods, it might be a little more even there if you're testing across all, not just like the bass stuff. So I'm interested to see how this number changes because those Sierra trout and panfish rods are also pretty new. So it probably won't change a whole lot here, but
yeah, very cool. That was interesting. I mean, I knew casting rods more popular, and I know, a lot of bass fishermen hate spinning rods, but I didn't think it was this big a split. So that was a little surprising to me.
It was definitely surprising. Like I said, when you see the actual number, it's like, whoa.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys are in the chat. I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you totally agree with that, or that surprises you. And I would say that's probably accurate for my rod breakdown of, I probably have 30 some rods and I probably have 4, 5, 6 spinning rods. So it's probably not way off base for me personally either. Technique specific rods. So they don't necessarily label each rod. So this wasn't, completely accurate. And obviously there's a lot of rods that can be used in many different ways, but they have their crankbait glass rods and their regular crankbait rods, which are labeled in a way that I was easily be able to pull out the data. And so that accommodates for about 15% of the total rods sold, which actually, those only come in a few models, like the Champion and the Fury have a few crankbait models for the most part. So it's actually a pretty good, I bet you if I reran it and only just pulled that out from the Champion data, it'd actually be a little bit bigger split. But that was interesting. And then like flipping rods are only about 5% of the rods. Now, obviously there's other rods like the 735 and the 736 that can definitely, 745s can be used for flipping, but the ones they designate as flipping and punching rods are, a very small percentage in the overall grand scheme of things.
Yeah. The swim bait, that's crazy to me.
Yeah. That's the thing, is
that's like, definitely an anomaly.
Almost as big as crankbaits. So that's cool. What kind of rod do you like for a jerkbait? I like the 704 CB. And I know a lot of the people like the 684 CB, but I like the 7-footer. But those are the two most common rods I see for jerkbaits. A sneaky one would be just like a straight 703 Sierra. Would make a good.
Yeah, I've used the 780 or 70s, the 682 and 683 Sierra. They both get it done. If you throw smaller jerkbaits, the 682, and then if you're throwing more like a 110 size, that 3 power is going to get it done.
Yeah, Kevin's asking, do you guys have any HPs? I think you guys are pretty low, or those are just
a couple of them. I could run over to the rack and read them. There's so few. There's probably like 6.
So if you they're really not listed on the site because there's so few.
Yeah, exactly. Same deal with those split grip Xtasys and the Sobe series. If you're after any, you can message me. I'll check to see if it's one of the few we do have.
All right. So call in, message Graham. He'll let you know if he can help you out. But overall, there is a definite shortage on HPs right now. Hopefully they come in soon. But that's I think a lot of them are stuck in ocean containers somewhere.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think they used a bunch of the first batch that came through earlier this year, just fulfilling warranties that they had backed up for so long.
Yeah, cool. So that swim bait thing was surprising. I think that's something we'll see grow. Like, I don't think that number is going to go down.
No.
I mean, not in the short term anyways.
I think that above all is a testament to the value of Dobyns. There isn't really another brand that offers that quality of a swim bait rod at these price points.
For sure. And I think the other thing that's interesting is that, it's kind of a 3-2 split on the graphite composite crankbait rods over the glass. And I'm more of a graphite crankbait rod, and I know a lot of people love the glass ones. So that's just an interesting data point as well from my perspective.
Yeah.
Sean, I like a 684 for casting small balsa, but I know a lot of people like spinning rods, like a 3-power spinning rod. C-rig rod, it kind of depends on your budget. I think any of those 7-foot plus rods in the 4 to 5 power are a great option. A 704, 744, in whatever series you want. Bill says he's got multiples of every except Xtasy. The same for me. All right, so that's kind of some technique specific rods. And the trout and panfish is probably a little bit low because I think those came in late last year, right? So you don't have a full year of data on those.
Yeah, same deal as with the Kadens that came in just after November, I believe.
So by series, I thought this was a little interesting. Not surprising that kind of the Fury, right, which is kind of the $120 price point rod, is the highest selling by percentage. But it is interesting that Champion, which is their kind of like, I don't know if I would call it middle, high end, or not high end, but I don't know how to class. So it's a $260 price point for most of those rods. So I mean, it's a nice high quality rod.
Yeah,
it's not like super
certainly.
high end, but it's not budget rod by any means. But it's been around the longest. So I think that probably speaks to the people that have been with Dobyns a long time, have used their rods. They're very loyal to the Champion series and have a lot of appreciation for the Champion series.
Yeah, and also just the amount of models they offer in the Champion. They offer so many more models in that Champion than any of the other ones. I don't know what the exact number is, but I'm pretty sure it's over 30 across
for
spinning
sure.
and casting.
Yeah, I didn't pull that count, but there's a lot for sure. Sean, we are going to touch about that trade in later, so that's a good segue for future conversation. I do think the Bucca rod would make a good A-rig rod, and it probably like a 10XD rod and several other things. I haven't held it myself, but I've heard some pretty good things about it. I don't know if you held that.
Yeah, I've got one right over my shoulder, actually, I believe, or at least I did. I would definitely second that.
So for people that have rod questions, do you have several people on staff that are pretty knowledgeable? If people want to call in and like ask questions about rods, is that something that happens a lot?
Yeah, that's kind of another one of the deals that Tom wanted, is he wanted to staff people that actually use the gear. And I've referenced to you our demo program. If we have something new come in that we want to fish with, we just go fish with it. So everybody here is definitely knowledgeable.
Very cool. Yeah. So the Sierra, that comes in at the about $170 price point. I think that's a growing segment, though. From what I understand, like the Sierras are gaining popularity, and they're probably like slowly chipping away at some of that Champion volume.
I always tell people, specifically between Sierra and Champion, is that if you can get a blank that is in both, you probably be safe just going with the Sierra because they fish so similarly.
I think the Sierra is a slightly slower action. It depends on the rod and the model, but in general, the Sierras are slightly softer. Not like, I wouldn't call them soft, but they are ever so slightly slower actions than some of the other series.
Yep.
Which can be a good thing, right? Like if you're looking for a all-around rod that can throw jerkbaits and crankbaits, a 703 Sierra might be better than a 703 Champ for that respect. And then the HPs, which is the Champion Extremes. So that's your $360 to $370 price point. They sell a decent amount of those as well, and they're out of stock, or they'd probably be selling more, to be honest.
Yeah, certainly. And
then the Xtasy is the ultra premium high-end rods on the Torre blanks. And I forget, what are those for? 550. So yeah, that's a significant jump. And you guys still sell a fair amount of those, but obviously you can see why that's less than 3% of the total volume, because you can buy 5 Furies for the price of an Xtasy.
Right. Yeah. I think Gary said whenever you guys talked earlier that he was almost even scared to make that rod. And then whenever he dropped it, it pretty much just sold out instantly. And we can definitely effort that.
Yeah. So here's a good question. Mitch wants to know, what's your guys' typical lead time for purchase and shipping?
So anything purchased before 3 p.m. Central Time is going to ship. You can be pretty safe saying that. There might be an exception if it's something that's not coming directly from our facility. But yeah, we ship everything the same day it comes in. As long as there's someone here, it's getting packed. And
then I think most rods ship USPS priority, so you should get them in 3 days typically.
Depending on the there are some different we can touch on that later if you want, but I'm sure we'll get a question about it. But depending on the location of where it's going, we can ship with any service, but mostly FedEx and USPS.
Okay. So yeah, depending on where you are in the country, you order on a Monday, you're probably going to have your rod by Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, worst case, normal, right?
Yep.
Cool. All right, so let's jump into these. I want to give you kind of the top 5 by series. So the Furies, which have quite a bit of volume, the 735C, which is a 7'3" 5 power, which is a pretty heavy rod. I think the 5 stands for mag heavy. And so to me, that is a really budget friendly jig / frog / big plopper rod, things like that. Small swim baits. It's a really strong rod, solid rod. It's good to see.
So he's back. It's solid for jigs. It's now I just saw a comment pop up. Half Texas rigs or half-ounce skirted jigs, Sean. That's a rod that could get it done. It might be slightly overpowered, but it's gonna definitely hit that. It's something that you could just pick up if you know you're getting into some heavier cover and you want to throw something that's a half-ounce or slightly lighter. Just lost audio, Rich.
That's because I muted myself during my dog, and then I didn't unmute myself.
There we go.
So what I was saying is that 735, if you're like, when you say Texas jigs, if you mean like flipping 1/2 and 3/4 ounce beavers, perfect.
Yeah.
If you want to throw a baby brush hog on a 3/16, then you probably want a 3 or a 4 power, 7 foot, 7.3 type rod. For the bigger plop, so ploppers and spooks, the big plopper, like the 135, I like a 735. Most of my spooks and things like that, I throw on a 703 or a 733 on straight braid. So
yeah, I like the 703 for that.
Yeah,
pretty much anything but those giant ploppers.
Dad got himself a 733. Yeah, if your heaviest rod now is a 704, at 735 Fury is a great rod to get in something with a little more beef. All right, he was just asking. He said he ordered a glass rod on Monday, didn't get a shipping email. So
right on. Yeah, if you want to shoot me a message about that, I'd be happy to take a look at that after we're wrapped up here.
Cool. So yeah, the 703 Fury, I actually have that right here, I think. So this is a rod. No, that's not it. I grabbed a few of my rods anyways. So the 703 Fury is a really good multi-purpose rod. For me, I throw it with like 30-pound braid, and I throw like yellow magic poppers, walking baits, spooks, and that's kind of what I dedicate this rod to, is top waters, and I throw them on straight braid. But you definitely could throw spinner baits, swim jigs, bladed jigs, Senkos, things like that. It's a pretty versatile rod. It's got the right action that you can throw reaction baits, but it is got enough sensitivity and backbone that you can throw smaller jigs and worms as well. And this is where we saw that swim bait skew, right? Like at that $120 or $130 price point, these two swim bait rods, you guys clearly sell a ton of them, and a lot of people buy them for that.
Yeah, for sure. I honestly thought that 705 CB was going to beat those out, so it was cool to see. I know it's close, but
yeah. When we did the interview with Gary back, and I think it was November, so if any of you guys want to go back if you think this is interesting and you want to learn more about Dobyns, you can scroll back through my catalog, search Gary Dobyns, and we do 2 hours of straight rod talk with Gary. And at that time, I'm pretty sure he said this was their number one seller. Yeah. And I don't know if that's true or was true or just not what you guys sell. I mean, it's a top 5 seller in Fury, so still a high seller.
Yeah, I believe it. I think that it's just again, going back to that value, having a crankbait specific rod at this price point. It's not really common with the quality that they offer.
Yeah, so that's 705 is like, people say that's a fantastic square bill rod. That's what I hear a lot.
Yeah.
So that 705 is a 7-foot crankbait rod. So it's a graphite kind of composite crankbait rod. It's not a glass rod. And I think part of the reason, maybe for you guys, I think a lot of retailers probably don't carry all these swim bait rods, and because you guys carry a lot of models, you probably have more of an uptick in the swim baits, where not everybody, you probably can't go into your average Dick's Sporting Goods and find the swim bait rods in the Fury lineup, right? So
yeah, I don't know. That's kind of our deal, is we just carry everything.
Yeah. So yeah, let's see here. 730 light for the frog. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't had that problem. I've got some videos where I've like just horsed fish out of wild rice with the 735 Sierra and not had any issues. But if you feel that way, the 736 is the way to go.
Yeah, the 735 is definitely for like what you would traditionally think of frogging, but here in southern Indiana, where we don't have a whole lot of heavy cover, we'll maybe even use a 4-power for that open water and skipping around docks and laydowns.
I definitely have 2 frog rods, and for my strategic tactical frogging, where I'm like throwing around docks and laydowns and things like that, I like a 735. When I go to like huge open mats in the river and pads, and then I'll go with my 795. Let's come back to that, Kevin. We're going to look at the XCs in more detail, so let's just remind us when we get to that in a few minutes. All these rods cork. So I think the Fury is a combo, right? The Fury comes with a cork foregrip, and then it has a foam back end, and that's for a couple reasons. One, it helps. Foam is a little less expensive, so on this model rod, it helps them keep the price point down. But where your hand is, right, you're going to get cork. Back here, you get foam. So even if you like cork, this shouldn't be an issue. And then it just happens like that's the way the balance works on most of these Fury rods to get the balance right. So the Furies will have a combo of cork and foam. Most of their other rods are all cork except for the swim bait rods, which are foam.
Yep.
Right. So yeah, if you're a fan of cork in general, you're gonna appreciate Dobyns Sycamore. Backplash wants to know if the Xtasy 754 is available.
Yeah, I know we have the split grip version. I believe it is in stock with Dobyn. So if you wanted to order it while the sale is on, even if we don't have it, we'd be happy to order it and ship it out.
Yeah. 3/4 ounce spook. Is that a normal size or is that a super?
That's a super.
Yeah. Probably a 734 is a good rod.
Yeah.
But a 733 will do it. I throw the big Vixens on a 733. Any Colts?
No, we do not have any Colts on hand right now. But again, I don't think that they're out of stock with Dobyn, so it's something we could definitely order in.
All right, so that's the Furies. Moving on. So that's the 120, the $170-ish price point, the Sierra. They also have the Kadens now. We don't have data on the Kadens, but they kind of have those two like at the very similar price point. So this is where we see the 734 making its first appearance, right? So this is one of the most popular kind of do-it-all chatterbait, swim jigs, spook, lipless cranks, spinner baits. Like you can throw a beaver, you can throw a jig. It's a really all-around rod, and you'll see this, I think, consistently in the next couple of price points where you're going to see the 734 in that mix quite often. Yeah,
you can literally do anything with it. If you're scrambling, you need something. I'm trying to think of a time where I've done that, probably up north. Like, for smallmouth, there was a time where we wanted to throw some swim baits at him, and I just didn't have a swim bait rod on me, and picked this rod up and was able to throw a half-ounce swim bait like nothing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're like a kayak angler, a bank angler, where you're only going to carry 1 or 2 rods, this is a great rod that can do a ton of things for you. Or if you just want a handful of rods that can do a lot of things, it's a great option. As a co-angler too, like having a 734 in your quiver back there is a great option. The 703 is a good rod. I actually own the 703. This is the rod that I used down on Pickwick last year, the national championship, throwing spinner baits, and I found it to be a great rod with like 16 or 17 pound fluoro. It can do quite a bit of things. So this is where I say that softer action of the Sierra is nice if you really want something for spinner baits, chatterbaits, crankbaits, but you also want to be able to do more. Like you don't want a dedicated like crankbait rod. The Sierra is a really good lineup in that 703 for doing some of that stuff where you can throw a Senko because it still has really solid sensitivity, but it's got that slightly softer action for doing some reaction baits. So our first spinning rod, the 702 SF, so that's a 7-foot 2-power. I love the 2-power rods for Neds, drop shots, Kitex, like the 3.8 Kitex, the 3.3s, any of that kind of stuff. I have a bunch of 2-power rods, and I love the 702s for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of this now. One thing we probably should have mentioned when we went over the power is that there are some exceptions in spinning and in the crankbait model. So with the spinning, the 2 power is going to be a medium light, whereas in a casting, that's just going to be a straight up medium.
Sure. Yeah. And I just, I mean, the 1 is the lowest power, 6 is the highest, and there's a little, but it's a gradient, and you just need to know, like, the 3 power is going to be heavier than the 2, the 4 is going to be heavier than the 3.
Yep.
For sure. Yeah. So this is right here, like 7-foot storage. Yeah, that's 703, 702, 704 rods are all great rods in that section. And so the 703, I don't own the 703 Sierra, but I do have a 703 Savvy, which is probably comparable. They just don't make those anymore. And I also have the 703 Fury, which we didn't talk about, but I find the 3 series is a great rod for, like, that's my go-to, like, dock skipping rod is a 703 Fury for, like, Senkos and wacky rigs and things like that. And then I will use that for, like, jig worms, shaky heads, and anything you just need, like, maybe like finesse jigs, tubes, things like that, where you just need a little more backbone than you would for, like, a Ned or a drop shot.
Yeah, I think that's a question a lot of people have, is if they were between a few powers in the spinning, which would you go with? I think I'd probably pick that 3 power, just because even if you are throwing some lighter stuff, if you're in some deeper water, you might want that little bit of extra power.
If I only could have one, I probably would go with the 703. Like, if that was like a restriction, I would go 703 first. Especially if you're a straight floral person, then definitely go 3. That 2, I really rely on that for more of the braid to floral. What's a good word for, like, roboworms weightless? I can't say that I've thrown a weightless roboworm.
That's a wild technique. That's definitely some California.
I definitely wouldn't go heavier than a 2. I would go 702 or maybe a 701.
Yeah, you go down. You probably look at the new Sierra, the super finesse trout rods. They make a 0 power. Those things are so light. The tip literally scares me. It's so thin. I don't think it's not an issue or anything. It's just one of those deals you look at it and it's like, whoa, it's definitely built for some light stuff.
I'll defer to you on this one, Graham.
So I would say the closest thing, it's actually just going to be a little bit of a step up in price, would be the Avid X. Those are right around the $220 price range, so you're going to be stepping up a little bit. They just came out with the Victory, which would also be pretty close. They only have, I want to say, 10 models in that new Victory. So if you want some more options, that Avid X would be one to compare it to.
All right. Well, nice. We finally hit 100 between Facebook and YouTube, so we're well on our way tonight. So the last one, or the number 5, not the last one, but the 735. So we saw this one at the top of the Fury line. It's also in the Sierra. I use this for my tactical frogging a lot. And but also, like, when I was on at Wilson and I wasn't planning on throwing A-rigs, but I just found myself need to throw one, it did a pretty good job with this fairly good size A-rig. So it can do a lot. I mean, like jigs, small swim baits. So if you're looking to beef up and get into an entry-level rod that's not going to break the bank that you can flip with and do a lot of things, like the 735 Sierra is a pretty nice rod. Big ploppers is another option. So I think, you said the good. So I think you said Sierra and the Victory are probably in the same ballpark.
Yeah, they're right around the same.
What's up, Gabe? 706 CB. I have not held that rod. Do you know much about the 706 CB? I've never fished it.
Yeah, it's an interesting rod. I think that's kind of going to be your designated 2.5 plus square bill rod.
Okay.
And then if you prefer a shorter rod for throwing something like a 5XD style bait where it's not a super deep diver, that would be it. Maybe if I'm trying to think, like a rock crawler or something like that, probably be a little overpowered. I'll just stick with the 705.
Yeah. So yeah. And actually with the sale, it's considerably less, right?
Yeah, definitely. If you're thinking about trying it just to compare it, now would be the time. Yeah,
and I guess for those that are just rolling in when we're going through the data, if you missed it earlier, this week through Friday at midnight, American Legacy is running 15% off all Dobyns rods. They're as marked on the website. You can go there right now. And then if you want, use code HELLA5 for additional 5% off. Gets you up to 20% off. And then anything else in your cart, you get for 5% off too. So if you want to grab some line, some bait, some things like that, you're going to score a little extra savings on those. So that's the promo going right now through Friday at midnight. So jumping into the champions, this is kind of their I don't know, their workhorse rod, the stalwart, the one that's been around the longest, that has, you know, kind of their name has been built on, their legacy is kind of built off the champions, to be honest.
Yep.
And the number one seller is a 736 CB, and CB typically designates crankbait, but this is probably one of the most popular chatterbait rods out there.
Definitely. Yeah, it's been crazy. I actually, one of the first rods I got that was a Dobyns rods was a 735 CB glass, which is also a good option if you find your yeah. If you obviously see there, if you find yourself throwing sort of the lower end, the 3/8 ounce chatterbaits, that's the one I would go with. But if you're throwing half ounce with like a full Zaco trailer, that 736 is the one that's going to get it done.
Or if you like braid, right, that 735 is also a good option.
Yep. They're considerably lighter than what you would think a glass rod would feel like too. I think that's definitely worth noting because that might scare you off if you can't hold it. But compared to pretty much any other composite glass rod on the market, it's considerably lighter. I think one thing to compare it to would be that St. Croix Legend glass.
And the one thing is Dobyns rods are typically pretty well balanced. So even if they aren't the lightest, they still fish pretty light in your hand. They don't wear you out being unbalanced.
Yeah, in something like this, you should consider what you're going to be using it for too. So if it does feel a little bit tip heavy, it's not like you're going to be fishing a chatterbait with the tip up most of the time. So,
right. And I'm surprised the 867 swimbait rod, which is a monster swimbait rod, that you've sold that many of them, because that's for like 10-inch glides and stuff like that, right? Like
it's a testament to the swimbait community growing for sure, and then again being such a specific rod at what is for a swimbait rod a really affordable price point. Think back whenever swimbaits were even more niche than they were or than they are now, how expensive some of those swimbait setups ran. You're definitely getting a good deal if you're needing something that big.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody else noticed this. If you guys watched Ben Milliken's video where they catch the 16-pounder and they go nuts, and Zark is throwing his A-rig on a Dobyns swimbait rod. You can see it clearly, the emblem in the butt when he's like reefing in that giant fish, plain as day, that Dobyns. He's definitely not using a 6 cents rod, Zark. So that was interesting. And I don't know if it was the 867 or the 795 or the 806, but he was definitely throwing a big swimbait rod from Dobyns in the Champion Series. So little nugget. And then you have the 734 full handle and the 734 split handle. So I guess that's one thing we didn't talk about earlier in the models. There's FH and SH in different models, and that's just full handle versus split handle. So like this here, I've got a 795. This only comes in a full handle, but right, that's a full cork handle versus and the Champions and the Extremes are the only ones that I think come in 2 versions, right?
Now the Xtasy.
And the Xtasy too. So that's what a split handle looks like, right? So the Sierras and the Furies are all split handles, and the Kadens are all fulls. Is that right?
With the exception of the 6/8 Sierras, those are full.
Okay, so there's a few exceptions, but in general, that's it was actually the single. I don't know what he was throwing the double, but when he caught the big one, it was on the single rig A setup. So that's something to be. So that we talked about the 734 Champ being a super popular rod, and actually, if you add this full handle and the split handle together, it clearly is the top seller. So that's just an interesting.
It's cool to see how even it is too. There's not one running away. And
how I look at it, I like them both. If I am definitely fishing heavy stuff, like if I'm flipping a jig, if I'm throwing a swim bait, if I'm throwing, a bigger crankbait, I like a full handle. Because I feel like when you really load up on a rod that's like heavy line, sometimes when I went with a split handle on like my dock rod and my jig rod early on, I felt like sometimes I got a little extra flex in the rear of the rod that I didn't love. But for my lighter things and I finesse things, I don't mind the split handle at all.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's what I've told people is if they think that they're going to be setting the hook harder, they need, to winch whenever you go down there to grab and you want to make sure that you're grabbing the actual cork. Just go with the full.
Yeah.
But then there's so much subjectivity with it as well. So just go with what
I don't
you
know
like.
King Tut because I only have the graphite versions. I don't know. Can you speak to how much heavier the glass versions are?
Slightly. Again, I think the way that you fish that bait, it's going to be negligible. Once you put a reel on it, you're not even going to be able to notice.
Yeah, cool. And then 703 spinning. That's a great, shaky head rod. That's a great Senko rod. That's a finesse jig rod, a tube rod for a spinning rod. Any other comments on the champs? The list for this is super long, right? Like this is like 30 models deep, so it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have one that I would have expected to be on there. I have some that I like, but I don't know that.
Yeah,
this really surprised me a whole lot, other than that 867 being in second.
That probably surprised me the most. And I think two rods I hear a ton about are the 735 and the 744, right? The jig rod 744 and 7. And that's interesting that those aren't on the list.
That's I would maybe think one of those 744s be on here.
Yeah, and maybe it was a little. I could look at the data here. So the 705 glass, which is a kind of a square bill rod, 703, 705 CB. Yeah, the jig special rod is way down there, like at 20, like half of what some of these other rods are selling. And the 735 is, right in that same range. So it's interesting. But a lot of the next few rods are a lot of their 7-foot crankbait rods, 705, 704. Are the glass rods a bit more parabolic? I think they are a little softer, but that's the draw. I think with that is it delays your response a little bit, just because by the nature of the rod, you don't feel quite as much. Which is why that 736 is so popular for chatterbaits, I think, is that it doesn't wear you out throwing it on that. It's definitely one of the reasons. But yeah, it's going to bend quite a bit further into the rod. But the non-glass ones also have a nice parabolic. I mean, I wouldn't say they're not parabolic. It's just that the glass ones are even a little bit slower.
Yeah. Yeah, you can get by with some of the crankbait models for a jerkbait rod. They're not too parabolic, but if you were trying to throw a jerkbait on a glass, you might have some troubles.
Yeah. Kevin, this is a great question. We're going to get to this in a little bit. We're going to wrap up the data here. And one of the topics we have is Graham has actually put together several potential combos at the different price points. So we'll get into that. So definitely stick around. Glass is less sensitive, typically sycamore. You definitely usually feel less with the glass rods. That's one of the reasons I don't like glass as much, because in Minnesota, I'm almost always fishing on grass. And for me personally, I find it harder to tell when I've got a little bit of grass followed on my crankbait or my chatterbait. So I like the graphite versions, and I find they snap out of grass better. But if you're down in Kentucky, cranking ledges, cranking rock, cranking stumps, the glass rod is probably going to suit you really well.
Yep.
Yeah, as Sean says, the glass ones feel more rubbery.
Yeah,
it's a personal preference thing. It is. There is not a right or a wrong. So let's jump into the extremes. So this is interesting here, like the 743 split handle. So this is one that I think I own this in a split handle and a full handle. It's just because I think if whatever was available, I would probably get the split in this rod, but because sometimes when I've exchanged them or bought them, it was unavailable. But so this is what I would say the 743 is my favorite smallie bait casting rod. So if you love to fish smallies and you like to snap tubes and you like to throw mojo rigs and you like to throw finesse jigs or light football jigs or drag a light Carolina rig, this 743 to me is like the ideal bait casting smallie rod.
Yeah, awesome for tubes. It's a killer Senko rod too if you throw a weightless
For sure.
Senko.
Weightless Senkos on a Texas rig. Love it for my stupid tube. If you don't know what stupid tube is, search on my channel. I've got a great stupid tube video. We don't talk. Well, I suppose if you're from Indiana, you don't talk about.
It's not much of a secret anymore. I don't think there's such thing as a secret in fishing. But yeah, it's a Ohio River special.
Yeah, and the 744 is a good rod. I used to have two 744s, but I actually sold one of them, and then I went with another 745, which is one of my favorite rods. But the 744 is a great like brush hog rod, Texas rig tube, light beavers. Up to 1/2 ounce football jigs, weighted Senkos, things like that. It's a really great Texas rig rod.
Yep.
And you can get that in the full or the split handle. You can see, I think they're like, so yeah, if you look at, it's a little bit, right? So some of these is a little bit cluttered because you could add these number 2 and that would jump above number 1. This is one of the highest spinning rods listed as the 742, right? Almost every other like model we went down, like the spinning rod was like the 4th or 5th choice that even showed up. This is a fantastic smallie rod, or just all like drop shot, Neds, Kitex, hair jigs in a pinch. It does a lot. It's a great rod. It's the action of that is just so great. That extra 4 inches of length for like casting for, whether it's largemouth or smallies or spots in that open water, it's a really sweet rod. And I think Sean mentioned it earlier that he maybe has that.
I always try and push people into a little bit longer spinning rod than they would normally get if they're going for just a straight up finesse rod, because part of a finesse presentation sometimes means distancing yourself, and it can be pretty tough to get a light little Ned rig out with a 6'8" rod. So you jump up to that 7'4", 7'6". You'll notice a big difference.
If you're not restricted by car space, rod locker, kayak, whatever, like if you don't have size restrictions and you can get away with the 742 is a legit rod. And I think there's some 7.3s and some of the other lineups as well for spinning rods. And I always tell people, whether it's casting or spinning, like if you have the room and you're not restricted, that 7.3, 7'4" is just gives you so much more casting, so much more leverage over the fish. It's definitely worth it. And then that goes to, that's not just Dobyns, that's whatever rods you buy.
Whatever. Thanks, Leo.
That feels like a good upgrade over the carrot stick.
Yeah, for sure. I think someone made a joke about those carrot sticks. We just brought some used stuff up to the showroom. We put a handful of carrot sticks up here.
I think the 682, I've never fished one, but I would imagine for some of the small like pointers and some of those finesse jerk baits could be pretty nice. I don't know that I want to throw like a 110 on it.
No, not a full size, but you could get it done if you like to throw it on a spinning setup.
But I'd say a 683 for the bigger jerk baits. Yeah, for sure. Better hookup ratio on the longer rods. So yeah, the 744, we talked about that one. 702 casting finesse. So this is for the people that like to drop shot with bait casters.
Yeah, it's growing in popularity. I think Sean asked earlier if he would if he could use the new panfish casting Sierras for bait finesse. I would definitely say that's a good option. But before they came out with that, there were definitely a lot of guys using this rod for those techniques.
Yeah, this probably make a pretty good shaky, like a casting shaky rod. The 702 is a great spinning rod if you can't fit a 7.4 in your rod locker or your car. And the 745, this is probably one of my like go-to rods. I use this a ton. Like I said, I at one time had two 744s and then realized how much I loved my 745 and had to upgrade to get two of those. And that's so 7'4", mag, heavy, extra fast. I think this one's in a split grip. I use this one for my football jigs, and then I've got a full handle one that I use for more flipping stuff. So this one I typically run like 15 or 16 pound fluoro, and then my other one I typically have 20 or 22 pound fluoro on. Got my little old school crown arc.
Nice.
But yeah, I love these rods. I just, man, This is one of the reasons that's kept me from going to an Xtasy, because I love these so much, and to like justify getting a 755, I feel like I'd have to part one of these, and I just don't know if I'm ready to do that. But like, if you love to flip beavers, if you love to fish half-ounce jigs, like, treat yourself. This is a sweet rod.
Yeah, you'll dig it for sure.
Yeah. Put a 7-to-1, 8-to-1 reel on that and get to business. And then 742 casting. I've never held that, but that's interesting. But I imagine that's pretty nice, like drop shot rod, shaky head
Same
rod.
deal as that
casting.
702. Before they came out with those panfish rods, people were using it for like fringy BFS stuff, like throwing super light lipless crankbaits even, and really light Kitex, and you can drop shot with it for sure.
Yeah, you could definitely drop shot with the 7A 740, especially if you like 6 pound.
Yeah, if you're throwing like, I would use really light line and super light weights, because like I said, that tip is super small. I mean, this is not a super versatile finesse rod. It's going to be the actual BFS stuff.
Yeah.
Throwing 32nd ounce lures and stuff like that. Like you need special reels for it and everything.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that stuff scares me.
Yeah, for sure.
You could definitely throw light A rigs on an HP 745, but I think you're probably don't need that level of sensitivity and light. I'd much rather use a 735 Sierra or a 735 Champ or a 735 Fury or a 7. Like, can you do it? Yes, but do you really? I mean, you don't need the sensitivity to feel an A-rig bite, right? So any of the Dobyns 5-power rods would throw like A-rig. I don't know that I would use my $370 rod to throw a A-rig. I guess
I wouldn't even want to. I would rather have probably a Sierra.
But I mean, I know lots of people that throw buzz baits on extremes and GLXs, and it blows my mind. You've held both of these rods. What are your thoughts? The Champion Extreme 745 versus the Kaden 745.
So similar to like what you said, where the Sierra is going to be a little bit softer than the Champion. That is 1-to-1 here. If you were to say the Kaden's a Sierra and the Extreme was just a regular Champion, it's kind of the same deal. Yeah,
they're faster. Like, I mean, you're definitely getting a higher end blank, but I think the actions are very similar, right?
Yeah.
Do I have problems with my guides breaking? Only when I step on them and bend them. So it's usually my fault. When I bend them and I straighten them and I bend them and I straighten them, eventually they will break.
It takes a lot to break a rod.
and hopefully you're using, sleeves, whether it's the rod gloves or anything else, but like this type of stuff keeps your guides from getting messed up so much. So I hated them at first, but I've come around to really appreciate it.
It's a must-have, especially if you're jumping in and out of boats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we actually sold out of the 610 Kadens that we had on hand. We've got some more coming.
Nice. All right, let's wrap up the data here. So the Xtasys, the 550 rods, the numbers go way down here, but the 755, so that's going to be very comparable to that 745 Extreme that I love so much. And the 754, so this is like your Texas rigs, your jig rods, your Senko rod. Like, so people love the 7'5" casting rods. And then the 724, 723, so just slightly shorter. It's interesting they have a 7.5 and a 7.2 in the Xtasy. I haven't used those.
I think someone asked earlier what they would choose out of the Xtasy series for a finesse jig, and either of those 3 powers would get it done. I think me personally, I would rather have the 7.5, just again having a little bit longer rod help cast the lighter bait.
Yeah, and I think the next one down was the 725, which, like, so if I got an Xtasy, it would either be the 755 to replace one of my 745 Extremes, or I'd get the 725 as my new dock rod to replace my 705 Extreme. But
yeah, and I think that it could just be me, but the split grip, the newer Xtasy 755 feels a little stouter than the old one. I know Gary had talked about maybe playing around with that and making it a little bit stouter because there were people saying it felt a little soft for a 5-power. And I might just be crazy because he just said that, but it does feel stout.
Yeah, interesting. All right, so that's the data. We're done with the data portion of this. We'll just got a few questions to get in here. So besides the obvious chatterbait rods in the XP, I think the 733 or the 734, depending on how personal preference for chatterbaits. A lot of people use the 734.
If you like to throw a chatterbait on braid, I don't know that I would do it on a rod that wasn't glass. You'd be feeling that for the rest of the day, that vibration and be a little stout.
Do you need braid to leader with the HPs or sensitive you can use straight? Almost everything. I mean, on my spinning rod, my 742, I run braid to fluoro, but on all my casting rods for extreme value, on straight fluoro for jigs and things like that.
Yeah, you definitely don't have to. Those rods aren't lacking in any sensitivity by any means.
Well, that will happen with just about everything, I think.
Get it done.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't use a glass rod for chatterbait. I use an old prototype 755 Zeta, which never came to market.
Was that going to be their flagship?
754 Zeta. Sorry.
Was that going to be the highest end?
Yeah. So remember when I said people that throw GLXs for buzzbaits? I guess I'm doing that for a chatterbait.
Yeah.
So. Most important question of the night.
I don't know if I'm in a position to answer that question.
Nice. Yeah. Sounds like mid-April. So hopefully in another 3 weeks or so, hopefully the new stock of HPs will roll in.
Yeah, hopefully soon.
Yeah, Chris, I don't know. The replay will be there. Also, if you guys do podcasts, you can search HellaBass in your favorite podcast app and listen to the audio version as well. So replay on Facebook, replay on YouTube, or audio version. So let's see. So let's talk about a few favorite rods not on the list. Like we just ran through a whole bunch of rods. I'll let you go first, Graham. What are a couple of rods that you love from Dobyns that weren't on any of those top 5s?
Yeah, so they make a 762 in the champion spinning. And that's a cool rod. Again, like I said, I'm a huge fan of a longer spinning rod. And look across some other brands. Loomis made a 902, which, without confusing people about model numbers, again was a 7'6" medium, and medium light and a light. And the northern guys really like that rod for hair jigs, and that 762 champion can get that done for sure. Or if you like a longer rod for Ned rigs as well, like I do, it's a cool one.
Nice. Yeah, I'd say like the rod that gets the most use for me that we didn't or wasn't on anybody's list is, where's it hiding? Don't be bashful. It's okay. The 705C in the extreme is my go-to dock rod. So like if you watch my fishing videos, you've seen this thing get bowed up all the time. And I like that with a Tatula SV for skipping docks with 3/8 ounce, half-ounce jigs. That's probably like, I mean, I catch more fish on this rod and probably spends more time in my hand than just about, although I do use the 745 a ton. And then I would say another one, we touched upon it, that's Fury 703, an amazing, it's like Senko rod.
The 682 Sierra is another one I've owned a few of them personally, and that's probably my favorite one. I use that solely for tiny little 1/4 ounce poppers. It's awesome if you like to target cast those smaller poppers.
Yeah. Brian, when we run out and they're all sold out, we'll stop talking about them. The XPs, when are they getting a facelift? I don't know. I know they've gotten one since, I mean, some of the XPs are newer than the ones I own, but he did mention that, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I have no clue on
that. You can get it on Apple, Spotify, iTunes. It should be on all of those if you just search. And there's also in any of these streams at the end, there'll be a link to Anchor, and then you should be able to find it anywhere. But if you just search HellaBass podcast, you'll find it. Yeah. Sean does a good job keeping most places lights on. Yeah, Kevin, we're going to get to that in just a minute. So good dock rods. What's the dock rod 705 run a guy? The extremes are 350, 360, 370.
Yeah, so with the discounts that we're running right now, it'd probably come in right around 270-ish.
But I think the 705 is available in the Champ and the Sierra as well.
Yeah.
So there's some good options out there, Chris, for that. So, so I think the Champ is like 250, and then you take $35 off that, or the Sierra is like 180, and then you knock whatever, 25 bucks off that. So
bring it right around 140, I believe.
Yeah. So yeah, let's I'm gonna look through these questions, but let's start talking about some of those combos and price point reels. So we've talked a lot about Dobyns, but you can't fish any rod without a reel,
right?
So walk us through some of the stuff that you what are you seeing people like? This is kind of based on your preference and also what people are buying, right?
Yeah, so keeping both of those things in mind. All of the reels that I pulled are Shimano or Daiwa. That's not to necessarily malign any other brand. It's just what's available and what we fish with here. But with that Fury, how I did it is I went through and picked every best seller in each series and paired it up with a reel, and tried to reflect the price point in both of those. So if we're looking at that Fury 735, it's a relatively new reel, the Shimano SLX MGL. It's a 70 size reel. So how Shimano does their sizing is if it's in between a 50 and 100 or 100 and 200, it's a half size. So it's basically a 100 size reel with a 50 size spool. But yeah, so that reel comes in at $149.99. If you want to go with Shimano, that's kind of the one I would pick in this price point. They also make a baseline SLX, which is $100, and across the board, that's the reel I would pick if you want something that's $100 or less.
Yeah, or Fuego is a good one.
Fuego is a good one for sure. The SLX, they trickled down some of the technology that you used to only be able to get if you were willing to step up to a Corrado or higher. So it's cool that they're offering some of those features in a lower price point reel. And then I would say if you want a similar reel and you want to go with the Daiwa, I don't have it pulled out of the box, but the Tatula CT is a solid option at $130. Pull it out and take a look at it.
What's up, Bailey?
Similar to that SLX, Daiwa trickled down the T-wing system in this reel, which is cool at that price point. And what that does, if you're unfamiliar with that, it's basically the line guide in the reel right here. As if you were to compare it to just a regular one, obviously you'd probably know what a normal line guide on a reel looks like, but I don't know if I can fit them in here. You got me squeezed in.
Wait, here, let's let me see.
There we go.
Wait a minute. Wait. Boom.
Oh, there we go. Full screen. Where am I at? But yeah, so that guy.
Yeah. How about I like the base Tatulas are a really nice reel. Like that's hard to beat.
Yeah, they're solid. You can get it in a Tatula 100. They have it in a 150 now and a 200. All at a similar price point. I think those are right around 150. So those are kind of my two suggestions if you want to pair a reel up with a Fury. That's 735 specifically. And for that rod, I would go with a little bit faster gear ratio. Definitely not a 6. So I prefer an 8 to whatever gear ratio, just the faster gear ratio. Anytime I'm throwing a jig or anything or anytime I might need to pick up a lot of line really quickly. So you think of when you're throwing that rod up shallow, maybe up around a laydown or something, a fish picks up your bait and runs off really quick with it. You want to be able to pick that line up. Yeah.
I was going to say, maybe if you're doing a lot of frogging, maybe 7-1, 7-3 to 1, just so you don't lose too much torque if you're really like trying to reef them.
Yeah, for sure.
flipping definitely 8-1.
And we jumped to that Sierra. So I guess, do you want me to do these combos, what the full combo would cost? I actually weighed them out. I went like way too overboard, I think, with the the combos.
I think the people that are here are all in at this point, so let's give it to them.
Yeah, for sure. So the Shimano, the SLX and that 735, we're going off for retail here, but the combo would come in at 270, and then that whole combo is going to weigh right around 13.3 ounces. And then with the Tatula CT, it would be 250 for the combo, and that's going to weigh 13.4 ounces. So just slightly.
So the dial comes in a little lighter.
Other way.
Oh, it's the other way. Okay,
yeah.
Sorry.
The Shimano combo would be 13.3, and then
you didn't make a PowerPoint?
No, I didn't. I don't have your fancy turnkeys. But so yeah, then if we were going with I think the next one, that Sierra, was the 734.
Sure.
I've got that paired with a Tatula SV, and that's you mentioned you use that for your dock rod.
Mm-hmm.
That SV spool is pretty cool. It's a lighter spool with it's basically got like minimal contact with the sides of the reel, so it's super free flowing. If you want a reel that's good for skipping, it's kind of the consensus one that you should be using.
Yep. I agree.
But if we were going to do that reel, that one is $200, so it'd bring the combo to $380, and then this whole combo weighs 11.9 ounces. Also looks pretty sick too, I think.
Yeah, the nice thing about the Sierra is they match up with everything really nice. They have that
they do.
Low key silver, gray, black, so it's almost hard not to match your reels, which is nice. If you're into that cosmetics, the Sierra gives you a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, for sure. It would also match up really good with the Corrado, just the Corrado 200. And I actually picked that one for the that 736 CB glass as well. But if you were going to pair that Corrado with the Sierra, that whole combo would be 360, and it's going to weigh 12.8 ounces. So it's about a whole ounce heavier if you want to go with that Corrado. Mm-hmm. It is a bigger reel. Let me just compare the footprint on the actual rod. So the Corrado's on bottom.
For sure. So I mean, like, there's another thing. If you have big hands, you like that feel, like, or do you like a smaller, more compact reel? Those are things to take into consideration. Yeah,
for sure. I picked the Corrado as well on this Champion just because it's got a bigger handle and it's got some extra line capacity as opposed to some of the Tatulas. With the 736, you can throw, like I said, some of those deeper diving crankbaits. You can definitely do that on this, and I would prefer to have a reel that has a little bit more line capacity than not for something like that. So yeah, it's got a lot of torque. I would go with what do you throw a chatterbait with, your gear ratio?
7-1.
7-1. I pretty much pick a 7-1 for just if it's something random like that. If somebody asks me a question like, what gear ratio should I put on this rod?
I know a lot of people like some guys really say like they prefer to go to a 6 to slow themselves down, like a 6.2, 6.3.
Yeah. My argument against that with a chatterbait would be you want a little bit quicker reel, especially if you're around grass. It helps you kind of rip it out of there. So like I said, they make that Tatula in a 150 size as well. So if you wanted to stick with the Daiwa reel and have a little bit extra line capacity, you could do that. But with the Corrado, this combo would come to $419.98, and then this is a little bit heavier setup. It weighs 13.5 ounces. If you're going to put that Tatula 150 on there, it would cost $400, and it weighs 14 ounces. So basically about the same, just a slight step up. And then we did not have the top 3 extremes on hand. The only one that we had on the list, I think, was actually the 702. And I've kind of balled out on this one, put an Aldebaran on there, which in the U.S. market, with the exception of another reel I've got coming up, is kind of the only finesse type casting reel you have, unless you want to go up to like a Xtasy CT, something in that like $700+ range price point. But this feels great. I'd never paired these up before. It just kind of disappears in your hand.
I can see like your eyes lit up. You're like, this feels so nice in my hands.
I love this reel. I had 2 of them last year, but this is a bit pricier reel. So this is the first one. Actually, yeah, it kind of outprices the rod, if you will, which it's another question we get is like, if you were to put your money into something, would you put it into the rod or the reel? And most of the times we say rod. But this is
you've been the opposite on just about every one of your rod and reel combos.
Right. That's With this specific one, I picked it because it's so much more expensive. With a finesse rod like this, if you want to throw some of those finessier type things, you're gonna have a hard time doing it unless you have a reel that's specific for it. So that's why I picked that one. Did you weigh that one? Yeah, I did. So the like I said, the reel is a bit pricier. It's $420 just for the reel. So the combo is going to come in at $760, but it weighs 8.8 ounces. So it's there. You go, Punch. 8.8. Yeah, 7-foot rod. So that's by far the lightest setup that we've got here. And then you could throw pretty much any tool on there that you wanted. The SV would be a good one on there just because it does handle lighter baits well. The newer Elite would be a good one. I didn't weigh or price one out just because I think there are a fair amount of options with the SV spool, which they have in a lot of their higher end reels past a Tatula. And then we step up to the Xtasy. Give me just a second. Things are about to get real here. This is not for the faint of heart. I actually made 2 combos since we had that 755 in the split and the full. So for the Shimano option on this, I picked a Metanium DC, which is a cool reel. It's got a neat braking system. It's literally I'm sorry. Which rod was this again? This is the 755. 755. So I've got 2 of them. I've got the split and the full. But yeah, this is a cool reel. It's got a computer chip in the side, which sounds a little crazy, but it just sounds like it's going to make it heavy. It doesn't. It's like I could pop this off. It's just a second. Maybe I can't pop it off. But it's a really small. It's totally encased in a waterproof housing. But basically, all it does is it just measures how fast your spool is moving, and whenever it senses it starts to wig out, whether that means it's slowing down a little bit or speeding up, it'll apply magnetic braking. So that's cool. That's a cool reel. It'll sing to you. What did that one weigh? Zing. What's that one weigh? That one weighed. The whole combo weighed 11.7 ounces. And what is that one going to set me back? That's 1,050. So this one, for the split, I put the new Zillion SV, which I don't know how many of you seen this yet. Probably. I've seen pictures of it and I held it in person. It looks really cool. It feels great. It reminds me of one of my favorite reels, which is the Shimano Chronarch MGL, which comes in at a $280 price point. I would have showcased one of those, but just like a lot of things in the fishing industry right now, they're out of stock. But this is a sick one. I weighed this one out. It was actually the exact same. It was 11.7 ounces. This one's a lower price point reel at $350. You're practically giving them away. I mean, so the combo would be $900. But whenever these become more widely available, I would say that I'm definitely more leaning towards a Shimano guy, but this could have me fishing with this. It's sick. Nice. Crazy. So, cool stuff. Yeah, so that's some cool. I don't know if we answered the questions. So if anybody had any combo questions that we didn't answer, you wanted to. The new Kratos bulky as the older ones. I mean, Kratos aren't light. Like they're not super light. Yeah. It's their workhorse for sure.
I don't know, I call them bulky, but they're not finessey. They're not lightweight. They're not.
They have different Corrados now, so they make that Corrado in a smaller MGL, similar to the SLX MGL that I had pulled up a second ago. And then they're also coming out with a BFS version. So it's going to be a smaller body. I believe it's a 50 size, and it's got a shallower spool on it. It's definitely not going to be bulky.
If you had a question about something about ordering or shipping and the 610, just send Graham a message. He'll help you figure it out.
You do need an Aldebaran in your life.
Yeah, I've never. I tend to spend a little more on my rods than I do my reels. So I mean, like, that was one of the things we were going to talk about is where should you spend your money in general. I mean, obviously, honestly, anything above a $200 to $250 combo, in my opinion, is a bit of a luxury. Like, you can go out and catch bass, and it's not going to hold you back. Like the amount of like advantage you're going to get, competitive advantage, the amount of feel, the amount of like casting distance you're going to get by spending more than $250. Like, there's diminishing returns on that money spent. Is the stuff nicer? Is it lighter? Does it cast further? Is it more sensitive? Yes, but there's diminishing returns. Absolutely.
That's what we always tell people is that, you spend $1,000+ on a combo. It's not going to help you catch more fish, but you're definitely going to enjoy fishing. And, if you're here fishing on the Ohio River, you're going to enjoy blanking a lot more.
And chroming out your Harley is not going to make it drive any better, but if that's what you like, that's what you like, right? I mean, it's like, you got to enjoy your passions, and everybody has hobbies and things they like to do. And it's a little bit of a luxury. It's fun. It feels nice. It's an enjoyable experience. Like, I'm not going to knock anybody, but right. Like, don't feel pressure. Like, if you're just getting into fishing, you don't need to spend $500, $1,000 on a combo to go catch bass. So like but if you want to do it, there's no shame in that game for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I just look and here I have a lot of Corrados. I have a lot of Tatulas. Like, that's kind of like my workhorse. I've got a few older Chronarchs, things like that. But like that Corrado Chronarch area is kind of where I live. A lot of my reels. I do have an Xsense DC.
Oh, nice.
Which I think this is a KDM reel, I think. Yeah. But I use this for frogs. It was one of the first reels that had like an 8/1 at the time, and this is just a little bit stout reel. Like, this is it's not light. Like, it's a pretty beefy reel, so it's got plenty of torque for like frog fishing and flipping. So I mean, that's one of my like little splurge reels for frogging. But yeah, I mean, like, for me, I mean, most of my spinning reels are Stratics or CI4s or Fuegos, things like that. But yeah, I would say, like, in general, spend a little more on the rod, a little less on the reel. I think anytime you're spending over $100 on a reel, you're in a good spot, especially if you're in the Daiwa Shimano game, in my opinion. And in general, if you're going to spend more on rods, spend more on your bottom contact feel rods, spend more on your jig rods, spend more on your worm rods, spend more on your Senko rods, like your finesse rods, where drop shots, shaky heads.
Anytime you value that sensitivity, it's usually going to be a good idea to step up if you need to step up or you want to step up.
Buying high-end reels is used. Yep, that's an option. Yeah. And we're going to talk about that a little bit too.
In just a second.
Sycamore says if you guys need to get rid of stuff, he'll take your hand-me-downs after you've invested in and I guess for those that came in late, we should mention this again. Everything, all Dobyns rods at ALFC are on sale for 15% off right now. And they're marked as on the price on the website, so you don't need any codes or anything like that. And then if you want to save additional, you can use code HELLA5 for an extra 5% off on the rod, and you'll get 5% off everything in your cart you throw in it. So if you missed that earlier, that's what's going on. That's why we're taking a deep dive on the rods today. So go ahead. They've got the Boom Room rods, they've got the Furies, the Sierras, they've got some Kadens. They got about as good of selection as anybody out there on rods for Dobyns. So we were saying, like, yeah, if you're going to spend it on bottom contact, spend it on field rods, spend it on rods you spend a lot of time fishing, right? Like if you throw frogs 90% of the time, treat yourself. Get yourself a nice frog rod, right? Like get yourself the boom boom rod, get yourself the 736 champion or the 735.
Yeah, that's what it all boils down to. It's just having fun with it. So if you're not someone who's carrying around a massive arsenal of rods, that's another thing to consider. I don't know what your stance would be on it if you took tournaments out of the equation. How many rods you would carry around, if you would condense it down and just, have all nicer rods, or if you would still want to carry the same stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I probably would have a few less rods. I probably have 30 some rods. Do I carry 30 some rods in my boat all the time? No, but I probably carry 20 to 25 in my boat at most all times, except for maybe like niche times when I know, like if I'm going smallie fishing, I might be able to get it down to like 15 or 20 or late in the year when I know I'm only gonna do a few things or things like that. But I probably have a little bit nicer gear because I tournament fish, but I still think I would have nice stuff even if I didn't tournament fish to some degree.
That's what I would say. A lot of our like enthusiast customers have never fished a tournament in their life, or maybe just one or two.
Well,
they're not.
I would say like the super enthusiasts. Yeah. They tend not to be tournament fishermen.
Yeah.
Like you've got people that like recreational fish. They're at like kind of budget friendly. And then you got kind of the tournament fisher that kind of live in that mid range. They've got nice stuff, kind of low to mid range, a little bit of high end. And then your enthusiasts care nothing about tournaments, but they're just like they're total gear nuts. And that's just general. But there's exceptions to all of that. Logan, the sale ends Friday at midnight.
Yep.
But I was going to say, but like me, even as a tournament guy, even as a very serious angler, like I still have like 3 Furies that I use all the time. I've got a bunch of Savvies that are 10 years old that I still use for stuff. Like I said, I don't need a GLX or an Xtasy or an Extreme to throw a buzzbait or a frog or like, no, I do use some of that stuff. But I'm saying like, I very much, like topwater rods, I'm going to be in that Fury Sierra stuff all day. Like that's where I'm going to live. For shallow braid rods, I'm going to probably use a lot of the Fury and Sierra because sensitivity is, I'm going to see the braid sliding off on my Senko rod. Like I feel like I need it and it does what I need. So, like be smart where you spend your money. And if you want to spend money, spend it where it makes the most sense. So I'm starting to see some questions again about the trade-in. So maybe it's time we talk about the trade-in.
Yeah, for sure. You mind pulling that up?
Yeah.
To answer that question, yes. Yeah, we do. That's a giant pillar of our business model is our trade-in program.
And if you guys don't know, you can sign up. You get your email and you get a one-time 10% off code, right? Yeah,
for sure. You get that code, and then any purchase you make after that, as long as you're signed in, you'll get points for that. And that basically just translates to $1 is 1 point. 1 point is a cent. So you get people that, buy a bunch over time, those points build up, and you can use those on any purchase. There's no minimum or anything like that.
Yeah. So what I know nothing about it. Give us the.
So basically, if you want, click on get a quote there, and basically you can go on our site, click get a quote, and you scroll down, and it'll prompt you to fill out this spreadsheet, some basic information, then the gear that you're interested in trading in, and that comes to one of us here, and we'll shoot you back a quote, usually within 24 hours. And you can use that credit for anything. If you have a purchase that you've recently placed, we can just credit off of that order and refund it onto whatever card you used, or we can put it on a gift card that has no expiration date. So if you have something that you have an eye on, but it's not going to come out till after iCast, but you wanted to trade now, you could go ahead and do it, and then just put it on a card that you could use then. And then all of that used stuff, once we get it in, we definitely push that on the site. In the past, we used to sell really heavy on eBay. We would just run all of our used gear as auctions, but we've transitioned all of that to the site, and we don't have a whole lot up right now. You don't have to click on it, but you can see on that gray bar, the used tab at the top. Just to the left of brands there. If anybody wants to dive in there and see what we have right now, we have some stuff listed, but we've transitioned a lot of our effort over the past month or two in getting used gear. So we have a lot of it in the back right now that should be going up by the end of the week, if not by the end of next week.
Very cool. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions about that. Thoughts on the Champ 705 for frogs? It'd be good, but I'd prefer a 735 just for the extra length. But that's me
extra leverage. I would say the biggest question we get with our used program is about how the shipping works, because there's obviously some risk that is taken on there, and that's why we try and market it as a convenience. Like it's a service. I'm not gonna lie and tell you that we will always be able to give you the value you would be able to get if you were to sell it on your own. But what we are doing is taking the risk of that package getting lost or broken out of the mix. And like right now, we offer promos all the time on shipping. So any trade that's valued over $200 will cover the shipping on it. And if it were to get broken or lost, we would just cover the trade value. You're going to get your credit if you're using our labels. Obviously, we don't want to push that out there in case somebody, wants to take advantage of that. But we find that most people that are dealing with us are obviously not going to do that.
Yeah, very cool. And especially if you don't want to sure, can you go on Craigslist? Can you go on, go on Facebook? But then you have to figure out what the market value of your rod is, and you have to negotiate, right? But if you just want to make this simple, get a decent fair value, get credit because you want to upgrade, this is a great option.
Yeah, for sure. It's something that a lot of those enthusiast type guys that I mentioned that are trying to get the latest and greatest, it's a good way for them to do that without having gear coming out of their ears. They'll just trade in the last year's model and put it towards what's coming out.
No, Chris, I think, you can see here, they've taken in Falcons, Loomis, other rods, Fitzgerald.
We'll take any brand except for house brands. So the only exclusions are like Bass Pro or Cabela's branded rods. Used to be Gander Mountain branded rods.
Punch thinks the fix was in, that you guys had NRX and nobody else did.
Yeah, we put that order in November and they showed up in the first week of March. So.
Well, you guys have been a long-standing, like I said, you started out by carrying every model of Loomis, so I'm sure you guys have a strong relationship with them. So I'm sure that did help.
Yeah, that definitely helped. Yeah, it definitely helps.
I'm sure you'd get a fair value for your Creator 150. I'm sure that's a reel they would flip pretty easily.
Just submit a quote. We'll get back with you. We'll definitely take that off your hands.
All right. How about a good Texas rig rod? Don't want a broom handle enough power to horse on them, preferably a 734 Fury series or a Fury series. I just basically spit out my answer as I would say a 734 Fury.
Yeah, I'd second that. That's a lot of their rods. Unless you get into some of the heavier flipping rods, I wouldn't really classify any of their rods as broomsticks. They all have pretty consistent actions.
That's a good point. And we touched up on that when I was talking with Gary, is for the most part, the Dobyns rods have a fairly light tip. They're going to have a little more feel to them. And they're, in general, if you know Loomis, I would say they're about a half power lighter if you're just comparing the last number on the blank.
Yeah.
Let's see here. What do they offer in trade value? I don't know.
Depends on the product.
Yeah, it depends on the product. Obviously they need to be able to resell it. So they're going to give you
depending
value.
On
I'm sure you could sell it on Craigslist or Facebook for a little more, but if you want the convenience of the easy transaction, then
depending on brand too, there are some like Loomis, if it's in excellent condition, we basically start at whatever 50% of that retail value would be.
Okay.
And it'll fluctuate from there based on the condition. But that's like the starting point basically for a lot of the more popular brands.
A lot of people speak highly that have had good experiences with it. And obviously it depends, right? I mean, there's certain things that you guys know that are in demand. Maybe you don't love it, but there's probably a market and you guys understand that. And I'm sure it depends, right? You'll compensate for what you guys know that you can do with it. So
yeah, we have to take everything into account.
What crankbait rod would you recommend for DT10s, 5XD, 6XD in the champ line or below? I think you'd pretty much need to be in the champ line for a crankbait rod, because I don't think they make the Fury is only a 7.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
if you wanted, oh, sorry, I misread that. I was going to say for like a 10XD, you could probably use like a 795 swim bait rod if you wanted to, but I just misread that. Yeah, you'd have to be in a champion.
What, a 765 crank? Is that a? I'm trying to think what rod would you recommend in a XP?
Let me pull up the list.
I'm trying to remember. I don't do a ton of that stuff. I think I have a 765 graphite crankbait version that I use for a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, so I'd definitely pick a longer rod. That 765 is a good option. They make that in a glass as well. Or you could step up to the 805. I would definitely want something over 7.3.
Yeah.
The general idea, and I know it's been beaten into the ground for years, but having a longer rod for those deeper diving crankbaits.
So this 735 could be an option.
Yeah.
The 765 is a good option. And then maybe the 735 Kaden crankbait. If you were wanting to be a little budget, you could. I mean, it might be on the little light side for 6XDs, but I think it would handle the DT10s and the 5XDs really nicely.
Yeah, it'd be perfect for a 5XD.
All right. Yeah, so they're right here. They're on American Legacy Fishing, Wilson. Right here. There's a link down in the description of the video as well. I can actually just put that here. Let's do this. For those, I'll make it easy on you. I'll post the link in the chat. There it is right there. Should be coming up in a second. And then you can use code HELLA5 on top of that and save an extra 5% and everything in your cart. What is the most durable but still cheap freshwater fishing rod? I guess, what is your definition of cheap? Because I would say maybe like if cheap, I'm talking probably ugly sticks.
Yeah. Entry-level bass rod, though, it's hard to beat that Fury.
Yeah, Colts or Furies are really nice entry-level rods. Not that they have many of the Colts, but there's some people interested in checking out your used section already. Let's see. Just curious. My buddy has a rod trading company, and he offers. Okay. Yep. There's another. Punch fishing, yeah. Punch will offer 5% above your price for Megabass, he said. So we got a bidding more.
Interesting.
But yeah, for people that I've heard this as well, the 805, like if you really want a 6XD or dedicated rod, that's a really good rod. But it's hard. I mean, to me, the same rod that throws a DT10 as a 6XD is not a lot of times the same rod for people that are serious crankbait guys.
Yeah. That's what I was kind of getting into, is that 805 is like going to be a designated rod, whereas the 7.6 you kind of get down to something like a Little John if you wanted, but I wouldn't suggest throwing that on an 8-foot rod.
Absolutely, Kevin. What's up? It's Aiden, Kevin Gray's son. Hope you're ready for some fishing this spring, bud. Thoughts on the 755? I know I want one, but I haven't held one. So what do you I mean, have you fished it?
It feels good, man. The only Xtasy I've gotten out with was a 753, I believe. And I was just kind of doing some light Texas rig stuff with it. The sensitivity is there for sure. I like the actions, just like any Dobyns rod. Mm-hmm. It feels good. It balances well. I would like to go throw a football jig with the 755 though. Like I said, that New Zealand rather has got me drooling. That combo looks pretty sick.
Nice. That's cool. Yeah, so like 100 to 150, the Fury is a great rod at about 120. With the sale they're running, that's going to basically put it at $100.
Yeah.
So, and if you're up to 150, you could definitely look at the Kadens or the Sierras with the sale and my code HELLA5. You should be able to get a Kaden or Sierra for right at that 150 price point, which is
right there.
a fantastic rod. Like, yeah. Vision of a Kaden. I have visions of Kadens as well. So like they did that I don't know what beta test or like consumer feedback for the Kadens last? I guess it was back almost a year ago now when they did it, right? And they had 100 of each model, and I was like, oh, I thought about it, and I was like, I'll just wait, right? I'll just I'll wait till they come out, and then they took forever to come out, and then when they first came, people are like, oh, these are amazing, like people really loved them, and I was like, man, I wish I had serious FOMO, and I was like,
yeah, I haven't got to fish with them yet, but I love.
Cool.
I love the appearance for sure.
Yeah, they look like the old Savvies, which had a really nice black and red look to them, right?
They hit some unique models too. All of the models, if I'm not mistaken, in that Kaden, they don't make in any other series except for, even like something like that 744. Even though they make a 744 in the Champ, like I mentioned earlier, it's a totally different rod.
Mm-hmm. So how does that work? Like, do you own? There are things that are listed in stock.
So if it's listed as in stock, that either means that we have it here or it's at Dobyns. Okay. If it shows back orderable, that means that we do not have it, and Dobyns is still waiting to receive a shipment. The only reason I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The only reason we took the extremes off is because it was such a long back order and we already had so many outstanding, and we didn't think it was a good idea or really thoughtful of the people who already had back orders to just keep taking more. So we shut those off, but once they get back to a better point, we'll turn them back on.
All right. So do you know if you have any of the 705s on hand?
Let me just look, since all of the extremes are right here.
All right, I'll answer a few questions while he's looking, just for you, Jeff. And if he does, then you'll just have to call him, and you can get it. Leo, Kaden versus Sierra. So same price point. Sierras are going to be mostly split grips. Kadens are going to be mostly full grip cork. Sierras will be a slightly slower action. Kadens will be a little faster action in general. And then the Sierras kind of have like a silver color scheme, and the Kadens have kind of a red and silver color scheme, and they each have some unique models and actions. So there's some different lengths and actions within the two Sierra, but otherwise they're very same price point, but they have different offerings. So they're not real. There's not a lot of overlap between the two, actually.
All right, we do not have that rod. We've got a couple of 704s.
Okay. What's the weather like here? It was rainy and like 50 all day, but the ice is about to disappear, so that's good. Price point, they're 170 for the Sierras and Kadens, or 180?
The Kadens are 170. The Sierras range from like 150, 160 up to 180.
So like on sale, you can get the Kadens for like 145, and the Sierras are like 135, 140. Without the 5% extra. How quick are the rods shipped out after ordering? He said earlier, if you order by 3 p.m., they'll usually ship that day.
Yep.
As long as they're in stock.
Yep. Yeah. As long as we've got them here, we'll get them out.
Nice. Justin says, shout out to you guys. Leo said he got his in 2 or 3 days after he ordered. Yeah. The free rods are a great rod. Sycamore says he might stop in next week.
Right on. Yeah, come by.
The Extreme 784. So that's their jig special rod. I've never fished it, but there are a lot of people that like that rod for like jigs and Carolina rigs.
Yeah, I haven't fished it either. I've obviously got to hold it in my hand as I have every rod. I think it would get it done. I would want something with a little bit extra length.
Yeah, another rod that I'm impressed with that I don't own, but when I was down on Smith Mountain Lake, if you watch a video I did last week, a 764, and I was throwing a 6-inch mag draft on it. that was a slick rod. It was a very unique action in the Champion Series that I was pretty impressed with, and it's got me my gears thinking about possibly what rod do I get rid of to bring that into my arsenal.
Yeah.
It was a pretty nice rod. Let's see, what did we have on our agenda? Anything new in 2021 for you guys? Anything like State of the Union, like gear, tackle wise, things that people should know about rods and reels, or what's going on with you guys coming up?
Oh, the biggest thing I would say is kind of that focus on our used program. That's it's constantly growing. We're finding ways to make that more seamless, and other than that, really, it's just like everybody else in the industry, just kind of sitting on our hands, waiting for some of the new stuff, and then waiting for some of the higher demand stuff to get back in stock. But we're in a better spot now than we had been pretty much the whole last half of 2020. Pretty good on inventory. Dobyns has done a great job of keeping up, with the exception of the extremes. Everything's been in stock, and the out of stock list for them is smaller than anybody else.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, Loomis, Daiwa, Shimano, a lot of other companies. It's like, and like when I'm sure you guys see, like you get a batch of like a few dozen reels in, and like poof, they're gone.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. If they're not back ordered already, they go quick. If it's something popular, we make sure to blast it out, and it's pretty crazy. It surprises me sometimes how fast they go.
Yeah. So like I said, like plan ahead. So if you think you want to get yourself a new rod and reel, or a graph or something like that, or like these bigger ticket items, and you want to get yourself a birthday present or a Father's Day present, or a graduation gift or something like that for somebody, like, or you want to have a rod for this summer, like start planning now. Because like you can't bank on that those reels will just be available in rods like come June, come July. Like they might be, but don't bank on it. So plan ahead, and so any big purchases you have, start thinking now for sure.
There's enough information out there for sure. There's no reason in 2021 to make a misinformed purchase. Like you just ask, and we'll guide you in the right way, or you can hop on the Dobyns forum, and there's going to be plenty of guys on there that'll be happy to answer your questions.
Yeah. So yeah, favorite. And I guess I haven't used the 784, but favorite 784 is more of a jig casting football jig rod, from my understanding. If we're talking straight flipping rods, I mean, I like more like a 795 or even like a 745, and it kind of depends on what you're flipping. Are we talking about like 1 ounce? Are we talking about half ounce? Like I need a little more information. Ryan says he ordered Sunday night. Do you guys typically send out shipping info?
Yeah, you should get a notification as soon as it gets scanned in by whatever service it is. If you want to message me, I'd be happy to look at it. It is an automated message, so sometimes it gets caught up in people's spam.
So check your spam box, and then if you haven't, send a note. Somebody says it needs more left-handed reels. Spinnerbait combo. I like the 703s, 733s with a 6.3 or 7-1 Daiwa or Shimano. And whatever your price point is. Sierra is a really nice option for spinnerbaits because it's got that slightly slower action. Yes, Sycamore. Same thing we looked at. Rods. So what all is in the trade-in program? Rods, reels, is that it? Or
yeah, we take in everything. Rods, reels, fly rods, fly reels.
We said there would be no cussing tonight, Graham. Don't you remember? We don't talk about fly stuff.
Yeah, I'll probably get heat for that.
Just kidding. Let's see. All right. Yeah, that's awesome, Greg. Sweet. Favorite Dobyns rods for Carolina rigs? I actually use, when I have to throw the C rig, I probably use my Extreme 745, which is probably a little bit overkill. I think the 764 would be a sweet Carolina rig rod.
Yeah, I think that's probably on the blank of that rod. It's good. I would prefer any longer rod for that, somewhere in that 4-power.
Yeah, power. If I need a little more budget, probably like a 744 Kaden.
Yeah,
somewhere in there.
Yeah, I would maybe, depending on what size weight you're throwing, you could even step up with the 5 because it is a little bit softer.
Yeah. So, and if you want to go even less expensive, then either like a 734 or 735 in a Fury. Okay, half to 3/4 ounce. Yeah, 745 extreme would be. I'd probably go with a 5 power for flipping more than a 784. A 784 to me is more of a casting jig rod, and I think although it is a little heavier, like the 784 is definitely a stouter action than the 744, from my understanding. But I'm a big proponent of the 745 if you're looking at the extreme series.
Yep.
Is your trade-in program limited to U.S. domestic made products?
No, we'll take any JDM stuff in. We're happy to see it.
Yeah. Left-handed rods are super underrated. Big niche thing for sure. All right.
Crack the code.
Yeah, so we're pretty much pushing on 2 hours here. And we've covered everything we wanted to cover. So if you guys got any more rod and reel questions, we'll answer those in the next few minutes. Just kind of recap a few things. Thanks to Arsenal Fishing for supporting the show. I always support those guys. Go to Arsenal Fishing. You can use code HellaBass15. Remember the sales going on. We've talked about that several times. You can use code HELLA5 on top of that. And if you missed all this, you can watch the replays on Facebook and YouTube, as well as podcast platform. Just search HellaBass. But we'll hammer out a few more questions. Are you Central or Eastern time zone in your part of Indiana?
Central. Indiana's weird. You kind of like go crooked and go an hour north of here. And
I drove through there twice last 2 weeks ago. So is Champ 34 too much for a weightless Senko? I would say no. No, I've definitely used a 4-power rod for throwing a weightless Senko.
I think I touched on that earlier. If you know the type of cover you're going to be around, that if you're going to be around some heavier cover, that 4-power would be fine.
Yeah, like when I think of that, like throwing a weightless Senko around docks and brush and trees and pads, 734. If I was going to be more like open water, sparse grass, I'd go with a 733.
Yep.
Do your trade-ins make it to the physical floor?
Yeah, we've got them out here.
So there you go. If you want to swing by and check out and put your hands on them, that's an option. Light lure topwater rod, heavier lure rod. Depends on how light.
I like that 682 Sierra, like I said, for 1/4 ounce poppers. We throw a lot of those down here. What's the deal for that?
Yeah, I throw almost all my topwaters, like my normal topwaters, on 703s and 733s on braid with a short mono or fluoro leader. That's my go-to. So like I'll throw my poppers on my 703, and then I'll throw like my Vixens and stuff on a 733. All right. A lot of people. Yep, Sean, absolutely. What's the deal with left-handed, right-hand reels? It's so opposite. I don't know. I reel with my right hand for everything, so I switch my spinning reels over the right hand. My reels, it's just more comfortable for me. Like I can cast with my left hand better than I can reel with my left hand. It like when I pick up somebody's rod, it's like,
yeah, it's always funny.
It's just so awkward for me.
If we don't have a right-handed reel out in the showroom to display and someone wants to take a look at it and you hand it, that's like the first thing they do is flip it over. They're like, how do you work this? But I'm the same way. I flip all my spinning reels over to right-handed. I think the idea to actually like answer his question is some people do not want to ever take their dominant hand off of the rod, specifically with like flipping where you might get a bite like as soon as you drop in. They want to be able to just hit it as soon as it goes down. And some people think it's goofy to cast and switch your hand to reel. So that's kind of the idea behind it.
Yeah, for me, and it's like so seamless. Like when I pitch, if I want to switch hands, it's like it's all one motion. I don't even notice. Like I can't ever think of a time that I've missed a bite because I switched.
Yeah, it's a non-discussion.
Non-issue for me. And I actually, when I'm in really tight quarters, I'll pitch and flip left-handed. I'd rather learn to pitch and skip left-handed than try to learn to left-hand reel. But to each their own, and they're both out there.
Yep. There's a reason they make both.
And a lot of people say they like to set with their right hand because that's their dominant and they get more strength. But I don't know. I have plenty of strength setting with my left hand.
Do you lift, bro?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say 8, 10, 12 inches mostly. That's about it. And it's a couple things. Sometimes in clear water it's for visibility, but it's more so that if you're especially on a walking bait, sometimes your line and a floral leader won't tangle in the hooks as bad. And like if you ever notice, if you fish straight braid, like the hook points will actually dig into the braid and it can be a big mess. So that's why there's a short leader. And I usually like heavy, like 17-pound.
Yeah,
so
and also that leader's there for a little bit of a shock absorption.
A little bit of shock.
Well.
That helps too, for sure. Cool. All right. Anything else, Graham, you wanted to touch on that we didn't cover? What about the Kadens in general? Like, what are your first impressions? What are? I mean, we didn't have any data on that. Are there any, like you said, the 610 is sold out? Any other?
Yeah, they're selling really well. The 713 is also out, and I can't remember the spinning model, but it's gone too. So they're moving good. I think that they're gonna fish somewhere in that Sierra range, given the price point. Some of the blanks, it's hard to tell, obviously, unless you fish with it, but some of them feel very similar to a champion in terms of the like crispness and lightness of the blank.
And so you said you have a couple Sobe rods in? Like how many are we talking and which ones?
I think all of them are out here on the rack, and we've got like 4 or 5 of them. And they only make, if I'm not mistaken, they make the 2 models. There's like a flipping model and then a 3 power.
I think there's 1 spinning, 1 casting, and 1 flipping, I thought.
Yeah, that's right. I see the spinning
there's
now.
3. So there's like a 7.6 flipping, a 7.4 or 7.3 casting, and a 7
over here
spinning, I think.
This is the 724. It's a pretty sick looking rod.
That's the casting rod. Let me blow you up here. Just hold that there so we can get a look at that. So this is the 724 casting Sobe rod. So 7'2", 4 power. So this is going to be a great rod for Texas rigs, lighter jigs. I mean, kind of a little bit do it all. I mean, it's kind of like a 734 with a little bit different action.
Yeah, if I could describe it, it's almost like a 3.5 power, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Okay, so a couple people are saying that they've heard the 724 is a little faster than the 734. I'd believe that. We're actually showing the rod that you just asked.
That's actually that would be a one to compare it to. The 736 in the Champion is actually a medium heavy extra fast, if I'm not mistaken. And this is similar to that rod, which, like I said, would be kind of right in there, like a 3.5 power.
Okay.
And that hits the 170 price point. So it's right there.
I don't know that it's stiffer than I don't think it's heavier than a 4 power, but I bet you it's a slightly faster action than some of the other 730. Like, yeah. What blank are they? Well, it's a Kaden blank. So I guess Dobyns, I mean, they have manufacturing partners. So they have their own blanks, manufactured their own specs. So they're not using a generic blank. That's my understanding.
No, it feels really similar to the Kaden. It's even unsanded, just like the Kaden. It's got that little bit of texture on the blank.
The Sobe?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Sobies are a Kaden. Yeah, the Sobies are in the Kaden series, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think there's a 713 spinning rod. So 7'1", 3 power spinning rod, which I think would be an amazing shaky head jigworm rod, spinning worm, finesse jig, Senko rod, tube rod. Pretty versatile, do a lot of things. The Sobe rods are really designed to be kind of workhorse rods. That's kind of the premise of those 3 rods is, if you could have 3 rods to kind of do everything you needed, that's kind of the idea behind the Sobe rods, from my understanding.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, awesome. Well, I feel like the questions have simmered down. I think we've covered a ton of ground. For the most part, it seems really popular. We were a little over 100 people on here, so that was pretty awesome. Thanks to everybody that tuned in. We'll wrap things up. Like I said before, you can catch the replay if you came in late. YouTube, Facebook, podcast. Make sure you check out the sale. I'll have links down in the description below to get to the Dobyns page at American Legacy. I appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing all your information and sharing.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man.
Have to offer.
Appreciate you having me on.
And I guess until next time, here to help you guys catch more bass and suck less.